Each day during the week I spend 2 hours on my phone, and when I get home about 2 or 3 hours on my PlayStation 4.
The fastest way to say we're disconnecting is to cut the Wi-Fi. And yes, we've had inappropriate behavior, yelling, name-calling, crying.
A lot of children develop learning difficulties, so I tell parents to stop screen time, and their children get better in a few weeks.
And welcome to a new edition. I'm Nadia Sharbi, and this week we're putting the focus on how France is handling screen addiction in kids. According to the latest national figures, at least 70% of 12 to 17-year-olds are equipped with their own personal cell phone, the main culprit when it comes to screen dependency. And what with repeated lockdowns and new e-learning habits, it's no surprise that screen time has only risen since 2020. So what are the symptoms and effects of this digital disorder? Here's more.
3 hours per day in front of a screen. That's the average for 3 to 17-year-olds, according to French studies. It's over 7 hours per day for nearly a quarter of 15 to 17-year-olds. For 3 to 6-year-olds, the average is 1 hour and 40 minutes, and it doesn't wait for first birthdays, with around 30 minutes per day for infants under the age of 1. What are the effects on health and development? There's no straight answer, but researchers do agree that both premature and prolonged exposure can cause problems. There's conclusive evidence of the negative effects on sleep. A study in the Greater Paris region shows that half of teens who have more than 2 hours screen time in the evening sleep less than 7 hours per night, instead of the recommended 8 to 10 hours. Other risks include problems with concentration, vision, excess weight, or even depression in the most serious cases. It all depends on the type of screen and the context in which it's used. Surfing the internet or social media, for example, is worse for sleep than watching a film or a series.
For more on the workings and possible responses to screen dependency disorder, I've come to meet paediatrician Sylvie Dieu Osika, who's part of a collective of doctors fighting for the issue to become a priority for French authorities. Sylvie Dieu Osika, hello.
Bonjour.
Thank you very much for having us. Behavioural addictions are shown to impact the same neurological pathways as an addiction to drugs, drink or tobacco. Yet the very notion of screen addiction is still a subject of debate among specialists. Why is that?
It
really is an addiction for, I would say, the majority of teenagers. Clearly we have a problem with video games and social media. But we have a tendency to argue over the word addiction. I think it's better to talk about problematic screen use, because in the majority of cases, fortunately, they're not necessarily fully addicted. In any case, the important message is that problematic use will have an impact on families' daily lives.
Sur le quotidien des familles.
And here in France, overexposure to screens and its effects start at a very young age?
It starts very early. At birth, in the first days of life, it's important that children play, have objects around them, handle those objects, because in fact, we're seeing serious language delays. Learning difficulties, coordination problems, fine motor skills, gross motor skills. Children learn those skills from being around other people and wanting to discover the world. And if the child doesn't do that, if the TV is always on, all their experiences will be limited. Verbal exchanges are poorer. With screens everywhere, we think children will be able to pick up a new language, but it's just not true. Before the age of 6, we learn nothing from screens. Children learn from their parents. Screens don't teach a second language, nor even the primary language.
And what message do you have for parents, perhaps, in their own use of screens?
The parents need to be available, because if a parent is unavailable, he or she doesn't make a proper visual connection with the baby. If they're transfixed by their own phone, by the TV, which is maybe behind the child that it can't see, they're not available for their baby. If they are not available, the child isn't going to have meaningful interactions. The bond will be weaker, and language skills especially don't get built correctly. They learn from looking at their parents, so put the phone down, your baby needs you, and the tablet will never be a tool to help your child speak.
Now, scientists, as you said, do all agree on the notion of problematic use. For instance, in France, figures show that by the age of 15, 5% of boys and 11% of girls display a problematic use of social media. What does that mean?
Well, I'm surprised by this figure because personally I think it's much higher in the real world. There is a lot of problematic use of social media, especially among girls. There is a lot of gaming addiction among boys as well. So why is technology harmful? Well, because we don't know how to stop. Teens and pre-teens are very susceptible to the systems on social media. It allows them to have lots of attention with its rewards, its dopamine triggers, all that stimulated by likes. Everything they do boosts a teen desire for recognition. And in video games, this constant desire to win, to be recognized in a video game as opposed to real life. And so teens are being completely used. They're totally caught in this trap. It's called captology, where everything is done so that children and adults get caught up.
Well, let's take a minute now to take a look at how French families tackle this problem at home.
5 p.m., Charles's classes are done for the day. The middle schooler immediately starts checking his phone. He's barely in the car and already absorbed by social media posts.
I'm on TikTok a lot. It's not that special, but from time to time I like it.
Once at home, Charles exchanges his phone for online video games with friends.
Each day during the week I spend 2 hours on my phone, and when I get home about 2 to 3 hours on the PlayStation 4. There's no real need to worry. I know it's okay and that I could stop playing cold turkey.
And yet, his mother has to intervene on a daily basis, managing Charles's prolonged screen time, which sets everyone on edge.
The fastest way to say we're disconnecting is to cut the Wi-Fi. And yes, we've had inappropriate behavior, yelling, name-calling, crying. At this exact moment, we're asking ourselves, what's happening? I'm losing a relationship with my son. Yes, it's an addiction.
This mother in Lyon chose to set strict rules governing social media access. No smartphones until her children turn 15. In the meantime, 12-year-old Diane can use her mother's phone for 15 minutes a day to check in with friends online.
I think if tomorrow I had no more social media, I wouldn't be very happy.
Her mother's goal is for her daughter to learn to use the internet without spending hours online.
The problem is also the amount of time, which can be very long and which can negatively impact the time left for activities with people in real life.
At age 11, 1 out of 2 children are already active on social networks. This despite the fact that French law bans access to it for children under 13.
Sylvie Dieu Osika, everyone seems to agree on one thing, and that's that the main problem is the amount of screen time that could perhaps be spent on essential physical and social activity.
Absolutely. This is stolen time. This is a very important point. The day has just 24 hours and children have the same needs they had 20 or 30 years ago. Children need to play, to exercise, to interact with others, especially with their parents. For example, when children aren't playing cubes, they aren't learning in 3 dimensions, which is absolutely essential to understanding the physical world, to developing fine and gross motor skills, to getting good sleep too. That's essential. If you mess with sleep, you mess with everything. And dealing with emotions must be managed by the adult who's there when there's a tantrum. That's how you're calmed down and reassured. If you are constantly being reassured by a phone, you don't learn how to handle emotions. Another important point we see a lot is eating disorders, problems with food. Kids eat while they watch, and the parents are happy to see them eating, but it's a real problem because they lose the pleasure in eating and run into real issues.
So are French authorities, do you think, taking a renewed interest in screen addiction in kids after what's been a very screen-centred pandemic, or is there still a lack of political will on this issue in France?
The government is really not doing enough. With small children, there's not enough information on prevention. Just because our health guides from 2018 advise that children aged 3 and under should not have screen time, doesn't mean that message is getting through. We need to really explain to parents that you can't teach a child to speak with a tablet. It's impossible. And we are seeing major damage being done. I see it every week. 2 years old who can only say words from cartoons and nothing else. Or parents who are very proud because their child knows the alphabet or colours in English, but who are completely incapable of talking, who can't say mum or dad at age 2. All these children can be considered as disabled. So I tell the parents to stop with the screens, and they improve in a few weeks. It's not that hard. The information is not being put out there strongly enough.
Well, beyond imposing strict rules within each family unit, another way of addressing this issue might be to use the lure of screens for good. That's certainly the idea behind a number of recent initiatives.
Qui est le plus intelligent? La machine ou est-ce que c'est l'homme? Alors qui vote pour...
At just 7 years old, these children are learning the logic of computer programming. Soon, they'll be able to create short animations or video games.
The children learn all the notions related to computer science. Here we're looking at instructions on movement, iterations, loops and bugs.
The brains behind the project is Céline Heller. Her association aims to fight against children's passive screen time consumption. To that end, it provides free coding classes starting in elementary school. 600 students were trained last year.
Our ambition is above all to transform the use of screens so that children are active and that they understand how they work. We don't want them to just sit in front of a screen, passively absorbing information. We want them to understand that things are happening behind all that and that the screen is like a door. So we take them inside that door and each one absorbs in their own way.
The next challenge for the association, training up teachers. Currently, fewer than half of French teachers include computer code in their classes, even though it's been part of the curriculum since 2016.
That's where we're leaving it, but don't switch off. There's more to come on France 24.